I'm going to explain to you in this video how we can do a variable analysis for one screen of our app. So this is a pretty simple app. Let me just do this. So it's a pretty simple app. All it does is it asks the user to enter some text in here, and then they can enter the subject here. Let's just imagine this is text 2. Okay, and this might be a list picker, but we'll just imagine it's text. Then they push this button, okay, and it stores that information. Clearly they're going to want to access that in the future, so we're going to store that onto a database. And then what's going to happen when the user pushes the button there, good doink, that's going to refresh these lists here, and it's going to display a list of all of the subjects and all of the notes side by side. Okay, so we have to think, right, what variables are we going to need here? So step 1, what variables will be needed? Well, we're going to need lists, global lists, to store the text and the subject in. Sorry, the note text and the subject text in. Okay. Now what's going to happen is that when the user hits submit to DB, we're going to get a so the first thing we'll do is do the name here, and then we'll do the purpose here. Oh, actually, sorry, it's type next. Name, type, purpose, and storage. Where's it going to be stored? Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to initialize a variable. It's going to be called notes list. Okay, and this is going to hold all of the notes that the user wants to enter. Obviously they can enter multiple times, right? So it's obviously a list, and it stores all note text when the user hits the button. It's going to be stored on a TinyDB. You don't need to use a WebDB because it's only for one user. Okay, so there's one of our variables. Now, next variable is going to be a subjects list, and in here we're going to store corresponding list of subjects which go with the notes. Okay, now what we'll find is that they both have the same index. So for any particular note that the user enters, the note text and the subject text will have the same index in their respective lists. So we'll be able to call that information forward by using that. Now the purpose of that is to store subject text, but not just for this one note, for multiple notes, so it's texts. Okay, again, storing on a TinyDB. What else? So, yeah, we're going to need another variable. Yeah, these are just going to be little quick variables though. Do we even need those? I think we might even have enough there. When we did this in class, I think I used 4 variables, but we don't actually need that with hindsight. Now let's think about events and what happens inside the app. Okay, so I guess the first thing is to initialize these lists, the 2 lists. Okay, the reason we do that is to save a space in the memory for them. We're going to start them as global variables. Now, to do that, we'll start them as an empty list, and then we're going to call from DB, TinyDB, and the tag, which is how we identify the information. The 2 tags we're going to call are notes list and subjects list. So those should have been stored in the TinyDB at the end of the last session. However, if they're not there, we'll have to tell the app how to behave if those lists are not found. Okay? So we start the 2 lists as global variables as empty lists. We're then going to make a call from the TinyDB, and we're going to set the values of those lists. Set the lists to the values in the DB that we get from the called from the DB. Okay, let's just switch color a little bit. Why not? Let's go for dark orange. Okay, next thing we need to do is think about, so let's think about what happens when the user pushes the button. User pushes button. This is all on screen initialize actually, all that purple stuff. This was all on screen initialize. Or at least before we do anything else, before any other actions happen. Okay, let's go back to so when the user pushes the button, the submit button, what do we want to happen? Well, we want to add the note text to the notes list variable. Okay, and we're also going to add subject text to, you've guessed it, the subjects list. Okay, what are we going to then do? We'll then clear those entries, so clear them so that they're empty for the user to enter more stuff. And we're then going to write those values to the DB, write the new lists to the DB, store them away, and finally we're going to update the lists display down below. Okay, so what we want to do is update this bit here, and we want to be able to show a different subject and a different note on each line. Okay, so update the display of those lists. And we're obviously going to use the values, these new lists now. Okay, with these new values have been added into these new lists, we're going to update the display of these lists over here with our new lists. Okay, and I think that's pretty much it really. There's one other thing we need to do. We probably should make sure that when the user quits the app, okay, maybe I should have added a quit button there. When the user quits the app, what do we need to do? Well, I'll let you think about that for a second. You should pause the video and have a little think about it. Okay, so now we're going to think about what happens when the user quits the app. So you might be thinking, well, let's make sure we've got these values stored in the database if the user quits. Is that really necessary though? Now, if the user pushes the button, we store or we write the new list into the DB. So we don't really need to write anything to the DB when the user quits the app. There is one thing we need to do though. Let's imagine the user puts some text in here, so important note goes in here. Subject, life or death. Okay, and then they press quit. What's going to happen? Are they going to store that information in the DB? The answer is, of course, no. So check the text fields of the note and the subject box are not empty, or are empty. Are empty. If so, quit the app. Okay, but if not, what do we need to do? Again, stop, think about it. I just stopped and thought about it. Did you? You should have done. Anyway, if not, what do we need to do? We need to launch a notifier. Okay, we want a little button to pop up and say, are you sure you want to quit? Yes or no? Okay, well, we might even want to explain why that is. If not, we call that thing a notifier. Okay, this is the difference, right? There is a notifier that can pop things up like this, but there is no notification. You can't get notifications popping down from the top of the app up here like the old Facebook apps and stuff that we're so used to. Okay, so we're going to launch the notifier and ask the user, do you really want to lose that data? Want to lose data? Okay, so I'm hoping this is going to be helpful to you. You should watch this video and then you should choose the most important screen on your app where you've got the majority of the data coming in and out, and just think through it. Okay, just think through it. I've got a bit more experience than you, so I'm finding it a bit easier, but I promise you with practice this gets a lot easier. Okay, please let me know how the video was. I apologise if I talk too fast, but I have a lot I need to tell you, and sometimes I get overexcited. Thanks for watching.